So these are my grandfather's boxes, and we're just opening them up and looking at them, showing the inside and the care that he made his boxes with. This is the inspiration for my box series that I created exploring grief and intergenerational trauma. The series is called I Claim You as My Own, and it's a project that I've been working on towards fulfilling my Master's of Arts and Art Therapy and Counseling at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. So just looking at the kind of fine detail work and care, he made these custom clasps, and he was always showing the family his particular skill set and new inventions in terms of how to be, a more inventive woodworker or a craftsperson. And he was an industrial arts teacher. I have a lot of little lucite plastic kind of project examples. I wore these rings a lot when I was a teenager. Even though my grandfather and I weren't very close, I really cherish these boxes, and I cherish the relationship that I have with these objects, even though my grandfather and I weren't always close. In some ways, I hope that the boxes that I created, in some ways on his behalf or in collaboration with the family stories, I hope he would be proud to see what I made too. So we're going to start looking at the red box, which is the base of the box tower. On the cover, this is a safe space drawing, an exercise that I reflected on before I began reflecting on some of the more painful memories about my family story. The boxes, this box in particular, has to be tied down because of the objects inside are kind of puffy, and they pull and push at that lid a bit. So again, the safe space drawing is the first exercise. And on the inside here are drawings and photographs that I did in my 20s in undergraduate in some of my first mental health episodes, or most acute mental health episodes. This is a poem that I wrote that I will read at another time. Here you can see the kind of embellished digital collages that have been turned into these pillow objects. And I was really thinking about the transformation of difficult or hard memories into these soft objects for memorialization and memory. So these were different collages of family bits, family fabric, and just again exploring grief and identity. I had never considered processing some of the information that I had uncovered about my great-grandmother. I didn't really understand how close some of my emotional kind of temperature was to the experiences of understanding more about her. So as I made these collages and really explored family photographs, I started to feel some of those emotions of that grief more deeply. These little paper mache objects are here for kind of to symbolize the head, heart, and hand. As you can see, I placed them on the pillows kind of as a way of, again, memorializing, remembering. This is a little lavender sachets. I don't know how you say that. So there's a really nice fragrance when you open this box. The bottom of the box is the floor plan of the Holidaysburg State Mental Hospital, where my great-grandmother lived for 40 years of her life. She was institutionalized in 1930 something, not sure exact commitment date, and then she died in the hospital in 1978, so almost 40 years. I realize some of my video did not catch the interior of that box like I wanted it to, so that's just the way this experience goes. So there's family photos that line the inside of the box, and those photos just show kind of like positive times, better family moments before my great-grandmother's institutionalization. So I just wanted to like hold a lot of like truths together in one box, like the truth of our family's experience with mental illness, my own experience with mental illness, and also that there were good times. There were times that our family did have their mother as kind of this matriarchal figure, and all was well with the world. So the paradoxes of grief, were really explored in this first red box. Okay, so this is the blue box. There's a collage on the cover, and the bottom there is the actual institution where my great-grandmother was institutionalized. It's a picture of me on the cover there. On the inside, I'm exploring psychosurgery, eugenics, and there's some first-hand accounts of other institutionalized women. The border of this box has quilts and rugs made by my maternal grandmother, as kind of a protective factor. This is a mask that I made with more family fabric. I think if there's something to be like a theme for this blue box, it's about understanding resilience and protection, kind of like once you begin to learn some hard truths about family stories, and especially family stories where someone has kind of been disappeared or lost to certain systems of institutionalization, there can be kind of like this feeling that nobody was protecting the family, or that efforts at protection, like from the truth about mental illness in our family, like the secrets didn't protect. If anything, they were more harmful. So these are more digital fabric collages that, again, like as I made these, I was just processing feelings about family secrets and identity and insanity, and how for so long I believed I was the only one in the family that was sick or experienced mental illness. This is a quilt that I made, and the border it says, "I claim you as my own." So these are, again, like protective objects to kind of battle against the isolation, the experience of being mentally ill within a family that denies that anything bad ever happened, but something bad really did happen. These are lobotomy tools. That is my great-grandmother and my grandfather. That is an article on the side about the state of financial affairs about the hospital that she was institutionalized at, which was very common for a lot of my exploration, was to find a lot of factual information, but not a lot of like who my great-grandmother was, the institution, and psychosurgery. I would argue in my thesis that accompanies this work, I argue that the factors of institutionalization and psychosurgery were really the driving force of intergenerational trauma and secrets, and the shame about mental illness is what drives so much internalized ableism and self-hatred around these themes, and causes us to lose connection with our ancestors because of their insanity. This is the yellow box. On the cover here, we have these puppets, one that my grandfather made and one that my father made. In this box, I was really exploring some of the objects that I would imagine that I would want to pack in a suitcase for her. There's a lot of family photos and other kind of miscellaneous objects. In this photo album, I taped photos of her into existing photos of visits that my father experienced of his grandfather, but without her, to kind of highlight the absence that her presence had in my father's life, and to kind of explore more of what that not experiencing her growing up gave my father in some ways. There was always a missing element that we just didn't know about, and there's something powerful in reclaiming something that you didn't know that was lost, especially if you've lived your life with mental illness. It can feel like a treasure if you're like, oh, here's the missing link. I'm not alone. And, some of the unspoken silences and secrets in the family had purpose and meaning. It was because there was a lot of ungrieved grief. There was a lot of sorrow. There was a lot of remorse in both my great-grandmother's commitment to the asylum, her insanity, and to the life of an asylum patient at that time. The existence of electroshock therapy, insulin shock therapy, a lot of these different kind of treatment techniques also erased any semblance of original personality of the patient, while it did eradicate a lot of the difficult symptoms before medication. The experiences that my great-grandmother most likely had inside of the asylum were very close to torture, none of it consensual, and very little of it based in actual medicine or science. And that's just the truth of some of this grief. This box says, I have survived many winters. And despite what may or may not have happened to my great-grandmother in the institution, my grandfather survived, my father survived, and I survived. And now I can tell her story. And that survival is really important. So this box feels like almost like a little suitcase for the journey, in ways that that explore how vulnerable it is when a family can't protect one of their own against the forces of the state. And sometimes you just get to have all that you can carry, and even that isn't enough to always have enough to remember your loved one by. So this is the green box. The green box is where I kind of begin shifting from some of that harder processing of the experience of my great-grandmother into kind of a renewed reclamation of the things that the family does have for that survival, the kind of beautiful life that I get to lead as someone who is actively working on mental health recovery, working on building self-care as an art therapist. These are little drawings of stones that I've collected, part of my self-care and identity. This piece about how just being mindful in nature can help me be very grateful for the things that I have in my life. Not to project kind of a story of lack on my great-grandmother's life, but I know there were limits to what she could experience inside the institution. So, especially when I'm having a really difficult mental health day for myself, I go and collect these rocks from the lake. I live very close to the lake on purpose because being close to nature is part of how I remember some of my humanity and my agency when I don't feel mentally well. I can kind of touch back to a part of myself that is durable and eternal like the stone, or durable and resilient and amazing like my great-grandmother was, to have survived. Also try to feel gratitude for my grandfather, for my father, for the ways those relationships may have not always felt the most supportive or nurturing, but that like today I can nurture myself. So this box has a lot of layers of kind of starting to experience healing after experiencing grief. This bowl is made with fabrics from my maternal side of the family. I don't have any fabrics from my father's side of the family where my great-grandmother's was, but this is still nonetheless an exploration of other kinds of resiliencies that are available to me on my other side of the family. On the inside of this box, I placed some like actual little green leafy things around the picture of Florence and some of the hospital experiences. I put a little postcard of where my great-grandmother grew up in Pennsylvania, just trying to anchor back into safety and love despite the truth of institutionalization and erasure. I don't truly know what happened to my great-grandmother inside of the institution because of the rules regarding HIPAA, so it hasn't been 50 years after her death. So I have not been able to access her medical records to know. So also this box is kind of a reflection of like what I can't know in this exploration or even in this grief, but what I can know is like that I'm human today, that I'm alive today, that I can tap into beauty and grace and support if I can remember how to, get in touch with the feelings of grief that I still carry for some of the losses in this family, but that today is, there's like beginning to be hope in this green box. So this last box I call the pink box. On the cover it says, "Maybe it's not about a happy ending, maybe it's about the story." It's an Albert Camus quote. And in this box I kind of come to a certain kind of resolution about both understanding and researching my great-grandmother's life to the degree that I can, the writing of the thesis, the forthcoming thesis that kind of lays out the why of intergenerational trauma and how I connect it closely to the experience of institutionalization, particularly around the American asylum system in the early part of the 20th century. These are little zines I made called "I Claim You as My Own." This is where the title of this whole piece comes from. The inside of this box just has newspaper clippings of hospital stories that to me just didn't tell me anything new. It just told me the administrative and political temperature at the time, but it didn't bring my great-grandmother back or tell me anything about her life that I might have lost. So this piece states, "My great-grandmother followed me like a ghost my whole life. When I was young, I experienced her as a void, a darkness. Her life, an unspeakable horror that happened to our family, insanity. I was afraid it was coming for me too. It was just a matter of time. And then it did, and then I felt cursed. As I learned to accept my mental illness and began to heal slowly, my shame of insanity and my family's secret began to wane. My great-grandmother became my spirit guide. Her mental illness and her life, 40 years inside of an insane asylum, became a story of resilience, not shame. If she survived, so could I. My great-grandmother and I are now creative collaborators. Telling our story transforms our grief into meaning." Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story and to look inside of these boxes. The thesis for this piece will be complete in May 2024, and I look forward to sharing more information about my family's story, intergenerational trauma, and how grief and containment can create resolution